per calendar year on the same topic. This prohibition shall include the repetition of the same topic in a statement of what is purported to be a different topic. Personal attacks or inappropriate language of any sort will not be tolerated. With that, I will turn things over. Thank you for joining us, Pastor, and you got 3 minutes.
Thank you. Greetings to all of you, and thank you for your good work on behalf of all of us who live and reside in this great county. I know you have been hard at work, so thank you so much. I pop on the screen today just quickly to encourage you to give an up or down vote to the 4 candidates who are up for these great county positions. What an opportunity for us to add wise, experienced leaders to our community and county ranks. And as people of color, they bring such a rich layer of diversity that we so desperately need in the conversations in our community. So please, please be considerate and vote either yes or no. My hope is that you will affirm their roles in our county and welcome their experience, their diversity, and their wisdom into our midst. So thank you.
Thank you, Pastor Newgren. Our next speaker is Reverend James Fambro. Reverend Fambro, are you there, sir?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Hello, my name is James Fambro. I'm the pastor of Christian Growth Center here in Rockford. I'm also the secretary for the Rockford Ministers Fellowship here in Rockford. I wanted to say also that I would like you all, encourage you all to give an up and down vote for the candidates that are present. After graduating from college, from Augustana College, I moved to Atlanta, and for the first time in my life, I see minorities involved in leadership and influence in every sector across the city. And I was stunned that that was possible. And then for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like it was a disadvantage to be a minority. And now that I'm here at Rockford, Chairman Hayden has presented before us 4 minority candidates, and we have an opportunity now to make it known that in Winnebago County, it is no longer a disadvantage to be a minority in this community. So I ask you all to vote yes, or to put these individuals on these boards so that it can reflect our society. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Fambro. Our next speaker is Reverend Stephen Bowie. Reverend Bowie, are you there?
No.
I do not.
She's muted.
Oh, you're muted, Stephen. You're muted there.
There we go. There I go. Thank you very much. Well, thank you. Thank you for allowing me to be here. I'm the pastor at Third Presbyterian Church over on the northwest side of Rockford. Now's the time for good men, good women, and good people to come to the aid of their country. Ladies and gentlemen of the council, I'm grateful for your leadership in the context of this pandemic and of our current struggle to rebuild society in the direction of greater equity and equality for all people. I'm grateful for your persistence in governing in spite of differences among yourselves, which could have kept you from performing admirably for us, the people who live or work or both in Winnebago County. This is a moment when being bold and bountiful is called for. When operating with undue caution or fear would be like poking a stick in the spokes of this movement for change. You have before you a number of eminently qualified nominees to serve on county commissions, each of whom is ready to thoughtfully, carefully, and prayerfully do their part to sustain our common life. The better angels of this moment, I believe, would have you move toward validating these nominations and seating these friends, these co-workers, these neighbors, so that they may take up their duties. Please vote on their candidacy. Please vote them onto these boards. Please move us forward now, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Bowie. I don't see on the screen right now, I don't see Reverend Malone or Melissa Champion. Is that correct? Okay, good. Thank you very much. With that, we have concluded our comments from the community.
Mr. Chairman, I believe I see Rebecca Champion
You're
on,
right. She's
on
on.
here as well.
Oh, she is. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
If you expand your window, you can probably fit everyone in the same screen.
Melissa, are you there?
I'm here.
Okay, go ahead, Melissa.
Okay, so I just want to start and say thanks for all the hard work that everybody does. No one's taking away the fact that everybody does hard work. With the climate the way that it is at a national and state level of government, I think we can do better locally. I think everybody needs to be a little bit collaborative, give some, people grace, whether you agree with them or not, whether you like them or not. So that's my way of starting. And now I'm just going to read a letter from Women's March Rockford that we wrote in collaboration to the board members. Women's March Rockford is disappointed and deeply concerned by the actions of our elected county board members to table the appointees made by Chairman Haney. Our county and our region, for that matter, has been watching the circus show that is now the county board, and we are insulted by the brazen lack of respect, the lack of due process, and the lack of consideration for the taxpayers and residents of Winnebago County. The county board members' demonstration of power is an affront to the individuals who were suggested by Chairman Haney. We deserve more from our representatives. The county board members, hold on. And finally, the diverse panel of appointees compared with the current overwhelmingly homogeneous representatives demonstrates the critical need for representation on the county board. We deserve more from our representatives. If the current county board members feel that the appointees are unqualified, as Winnebago County resident Christina Ruber aptly stated, bring them to a vote and explain your reasoning for doing so. The difference in process for this panel of appointees, also noted by Ruber, is appalling and does not go unnoticed by the residents of Winnebago County, the people you represent. We are watching this display of utter incompetence, and it's disappointing and embarrassing. Women's March Rockford is a nonpartisan women's advocacy organization that represents thousands of women in this county. We are keenly aware of the level of commitment it takes to be an elected official. It's hard work, but Women's March Rockford also believes as an elected official, you have the obligation to represent your constituencies. And that means everyone in your district. We demand that the county board representatives take a vote on this panel of appointees and be publicly accountable for their reasoning to their constituents. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, Melissa. And with that, we have concluded, unless Reverend Malone has joined us, we have concluded our the comments from the community portion of the meeting. We will back up for a second. I believe Steve Chapman indicated to me that he may have our new county administrator, Pat Thompson, who's phoning in, wanted to say, introduce himself to the whole board. Pat, are you with us? Steve, do you know if Pat's on with us at all?
I don't believe I've seen him on yet, so
Okay.
I guess we'll maybe later on.
Okay, well, the suspense will build. So what we'll do, if Pat joins us later this evening, he's going to be officially starting, I believe, the 24th of August. Is that correct, Steve?
Yes.
Okay, if Pat joins us a little later this evening, I'm sure there's not going to be any opposition to giving Pat the floor for a few minutes to talk to the board and introduce himself ahead of his arrival officially on the 24th. So with that said, we will move on to board member correspondence. Are there any comments by board members this evening? Please put your hand up if you do have a question, or I'm sorry, a comment under board member correspondence. I do not see any, so I'll move on quickly to the chairman's report. I was just going to mention that, again, our new county administrator will begin on the 24th. I do see that Dr. Martell has joined us. I know there was some question about her availability because of her being pulled in multiple directions. If any board members do have questions, I know there was some comments around quarantining if there's travel out of state to various states. That is not new. That has been a guideline that's been in place for a little bit of time now. However, it really broke in the news this week and made a splash. But if anybody has any questions for Dr. Martell, we could interject that and back up to any board member correspondence or anything you need related to COVID-19. I did want to mention that since Sandy is with us this evening. The only other thing I would just add, not to beat a dead horse, is, I would ask the board to consider taking the 4 appointees off the table this evening and putting this behind us with a vote. I understand that as we go into the hot and heavy of budget season, that people of goodwill can see things differently around important issues, and budgets and policy and appointments are all important issues. And I do, my concern is twofold. Number one, in action now, it is a distraction to other issues, and I believe it does send the wrong message. And I understand if people see a vote a different way, then you earned the right to vote, and nobody's going to take that away from you. The second concern I have, very bluntly, is the comment was made at multiple open meetings that we should wait to the next chairman, which is not for some time. It's well over a quarter away. We are going to do a number of things in the next few months, including passing a budget that the next chairman and next administrator primarily and new board members coming in will be, for better or worse terms, stuck with the first year of their service. In this case, approving these appointments versus letting them lay over, I think that positions our next chairman, no matter who it is, very poorly. Because if this hangs out and we leave things tabled indefinitely and don't take action, my concern is that the first question out of everybody's mouth in early December is, well, what are you going to do with these appointments? And then if it's approved at that time, it looks like it was a political delay. And if they're pulled or they mysteriously disappear or they're pulled back, then we just had people waiting on an answer that I think are ready to serve our community, but they just need a yes or a no, whether or not their service
Mr. Chairman,
would be.
Mr. Chairman.
Excuse me, I have the floor right now, Mrs. Red, under chairman's reports. And so as we go forward, I would again ask for consideration on taking those folks off the table this evening and taking action. So with that, the only other item I had is that, there was a comment made, I believe a number of comments made about the airport back a few months ago. A lot of them on this board floor and in our community. And I want to clarify something, is that in bringing forward an appointment to the airport authority, who is not a political person by nature, who is a 27-year banker, who quite frankly, I do not know of this person's political affiliation. I do know of their tremendous track record of service in our community. After events that transpired in May and June, it became more clear than ever that having the county's 2 appointments, not just one of them, be folks that are not overly political by nature, that are, not very close friends with either the executive director, have independence from other board members, that a time for a new face would make sense. And I did hear at that time calls for change, and I believe the board took action in the form of a resolution calling out the executive director for some of his words, and also being frustrated with the board at the airport for not taking more aggressive action. And so the response and feedback I heard from the board coming forward with a recommendation the next month was a response to feedback that I did hear directly from you all. Many of you over the course of days and weeks at that time, I understand people can see things differently, but I also do want to point people back. Not so long ago, there was a lot of consternation around the airport authority and the idea that perhaps some behavior on that board was being allowed to occur. And that was a factor in recommending the person that I have recommended in polling them. So with that, I will conclude the chairman's report. Is there any other quick comments under board member correspondence? I just didn't want to cut anybody off on that.
Okay, I have a comment, but it's not on the correspondence.
Okay, go ahead, Mrs. Red. I'll allow that under anything you want it to be under. Go ahead.
Okay, I make a motion that the appointees stay on the table. I need a second for that, please.
Point of order. Point of order. Motion's already on the table. This is not an appropriate place to make motions.
So we
Chairman
have,
allowed it. The chairman allowed it.
Well, I would second it if he allowed it.
no. So right now we're under chairman's report, which is concluding. And so as we move out of chairman's report, the motion by Mrs. Motion by Mrs. Red, I do not believe is in order. A motion to keep something where it's at is
The word is dilatory.
oh, well, I'll go with that word. But basically the four appointments, Mrs. Red, are on the table. And so a motion to keep them on the table, it would, I guess I would not take that as a legitimate motion.
Mr. Kalinkas.
They're already on the table.
Mr. Kalinkas.
Yes.
Am I in order?
I want to make sure that I understand what your motion is. You want to
My
make a
motion
motion?
is
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
leave the appointees on the table. Mr. Haney allowed me to speak.
Mhm.
Just need a second.
The problem is that the motion, even if it's seconded and voted on, would have no effect. It would just leave things the way that they are.
Okay,
See what I mean? I mean, it's on the table now. You would be, I guess, making a motion to leave it. And I guess if nothing is done, it would automatically be left on the table anyway.
okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Red. Moving on to the next item on the agenda, Mr. Arena. I see a couple hands up. Mr. Arena.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to make Clerk Gummow aware that Mr. Billich has arrived, and if it was missed, Mr. Westcott's here as well.
Thank you very much, Mr. Arena. I did see Mr. Westcott, and I will mark Mr. Billich present as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Arena. Appreciate that. Mr. Tassoni, backing up to board member correspondence.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I believe I heard you say that would be appropriate time if we had any inquiries with Dr. Martell at this time to take it under board member correspondence. Is that correct?
Let's go ahead and do that. Dr. Martell, are you there? I see she crossed off her video for a minute. Dr. Martell, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Tassoni.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I guess my questions, comments go to Dr. Martell. And like I say, I am familiar with at least the recommendation advisory that came out regarding either vacationing or visiting these 20 or so states that are on this list of caution. And I don't know what you can say to convince me the rationale, but I just take, it makes no sense that if you reside in Wisconsin, Monday through Friday on the weekends, and you work in Winnebago County, that's okay. But if you go to Wisconsin, let's just say for me, for example, I go to Beloit to pick up a 6-pack of spotted cow. I got to quarantine for 14 days, or at least that's the way the language says. And specifically, I had a couple phone calls of residents that live in Winnebago County and work in Wisconsin Monday through Friday and frequent many different businesses. mainly, what do you say to those people? And I'd just like to hear, is this cautionary advisory requested? And just get your take on that and try to explain it in more detail. Thank you.
Dr. Martell.
Sure, Mr. So, thank you for the question. First of all, the travel guidance came out. Really, we began this discussion at the end of June and began with more formal discussions as other counties around were looking at. And what we look at is the case rate in comparison to our own case rate. And if you read through the guidance document, people that normally work here are considered cohorted. So if every day I come into the work site from Wisconsin and I'm part of that cohort, again, that's typically considered relatively low risk. It's more the vacationing scenarios that we're talking about, which normally, if you're not normally traveling back and forth, so we have people that reside in Wisconsin and work in Winnebago and vice versa, that come in for 1 or 2 days, or maybe you're going onto a vacation hotspot. These are the kinds of things that create the greatest risk because you're not typically part of that group or environment. And so we are looking at that again as we bring kids into the colleges into our area. So for instance, Rockford University, one of the questions came up if we've got students coming in from Florida that will be residents now of Winnebago County, the importance of quarantining them for the 2-week period before they start to be then intermixed with the general population of kids that are coming in from our region and other areas. And again, it was a recommendation. Employers can decide how they implement that and how they work through that. And remember, we are planning with the goal of opening our schools. So we want to keep our new infection rate low. And there are areas and regions that we will work through. Today, I looked at some guidance as well coming out. For things like, well, if I go this route and I come this way, how can we make it as safe as possible for people dropping off kids at college right now in some of the areas, people traveling to Louisiana for this? The idea being that, again, that concept of quarantine so we don't continue to bring a new infection into our region is really what we're looking at. Chicago has a much more restrictive, they can actually implement a ban. This was travel guidance. And so we asked employers and different entities to take a look at that and see, could they help us work through that so we did not bring new infection into the community?
Yes, follow up, Mr. Tassoni.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I do understand, Dr. Martell, that it is in caution and trying to protect the community, but I see it as being nil. I don't think it goes without saying, and it's just, it just makes no sense, and it goes without saying, and I don't see where the enforcement, I think it's going to take, a small percentage of the people that just do it on their own free will, and that's the best you're going to get. Thank you.
Exactly. And I agree, Mr. Tassoni, that we've said this before, and it's no out of disrespect to our law enforcement, but we're not going to police ourselves or enforce our way out of the pandemic. This was really being established as people said, is it okay for me to travel? What do I need to do? Is this a good place to travel to? What would I need to do to make sure I'm as safe as possible? And so we are working with, that's why we issued the travel guidance. We were getting upwards of 10 and 12 requests about evaluating employers who are saying, can my employee go here? We finally said we need to take a look at this as a general guidance document and put this out so both the public can make an informed choice and employers can work with them on those informed choices.
Thank you, Mr. Tassoni. Thank you. Any other questions for Dr. Martell? Seeing none, then we'll move through to announcements and communications. Clerk Gummel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The items listed below were received as correspondence.
Okay, we'll go ahead and place those on file. Thank you very much, Clerk Gummel. Our next item of business, number 10, is the consent agenda, which includes 3 items for you this evening. The raffle report, the approval of the July 9th minutes, and the layover of the July 23rd minutes. May I please have a motion? I got a motion by Mr. Hoffman and a second by Mr. Fellers. Thank you. Item is now before the board. Is there any discussion or comments on the consent agenda? Seeing none, are there any board members who are opposed to this motion? I do not hear any dissent or see any dissent, so we will ask the clerk to cast a yes vote for all members present We've passed the consent agenda unanimously. Thank you very much. County Administrator's Report. Steve?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Not a lot to report. We're working heavily on the budget issues that we have, and also on some other internal issues that have come up. So hopefully by the next finance meeting next Thursday, we'll have some numbers to talk about in terms of what it looks like for this year and what it looks like for next year.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Steve. And just as a reminder, we do have a board meeting on the 27th of August, which is 2 weeks from now. However, then I believe the week after that is, because it's September is budget month, the board meeting in early September, where the board budget for fiscal year 21 is the draft budget is put forward to the board, is on September 3rd. So we will have back-to-back meetings, one on, excuse me here, on August 27th, which is 2 weeks from tonight. And then 3 weeks from tonight will be the, I guess, the introduction of the draft budget. I see Mr. Salgado nodding his head, affirming that. And then there's an extra week off, and the board would have the opportunity to approve the budget for fiscal year 21 on September 24th. So that's coming fast. And there any other comments, Steve, or any department head updates? I believe Carlos was on. First of all, Carlos, thanks for the information the last few days. But is there any other department head updates? Seeing none, we will move on to unfinished business. Oh, I'm sorry.
Igor.
Yes.
I'm sorry. I missed something with the announcements and communications.
Yeah, go ahead.
We should be real proud that Lori Gumbel and her office has come up with a whole new idea of how to do absentee ballots by putting a container that is secure outside of our building that people can drive up and drop off their ballots. Wonderful idea, Lori. Don't know where you got it, but thank you for giving so many people that opportunity to do absentee voting by dropping them in the mailbox right in front of our office. Thank you.
Thank you, Angie.
Thank you, Mrs. Gorel, and thank you, Clerk Gumau. On to number 13, unfinished business. The only unfinished business we have are the 4 appointees that were tabled at the July 9th meeting. With that, I would entertain a motion to take them off the table.
Mr. Chairman, this is Tim Neighbors. I would like to entertain a motion to take the 4 appointees off the table.
So there's a motion by Mr. Neighbors to take the 4 appointees off the table. I see a second by Mr. Fellers, Mrs. Crosby, and Mr. Kelly. So we have a motion and a second to take the 4 appointees off the table, which then separately would allow for action this evening. Is there any discussion? Mr. Neighbors, I could go to you first since you made the motion.
Point of order,
to take
Mr.
these off
Chairman.
the table. The speaking to the items should be about taking them off the table or not, and why now versus not taking them off the table.
Point of order. This motion is not debatable.
We talked about this last time, but take them off the table is not a debatable motion. Mr. Arena is correct.
Yeah, my mistake, Mr. Arena. So the motion and the second is to take these items off the table. And it is not debatable about whether or not to take them off the table. So with that, I will ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll start with Mr. Kelly.
Yes.
Mr. McDonald.
No.
Mr. Neighbors.
Yes.
Mrs. Red.
No.
Mr. Salgado.
No.
Mr. Schultz,
No.
Mr. Tassoni,
No.
Mr. Webster,
No.
Mr. Westcott, Mr. Westcott,
No.
that was a no. Mr. Zintak, Mr. Zintak, please remove the mute from your speaker so I can hear your vote, please.
No.
Thank you. Mr. Arena,
No, no,
Mr. Billich, Mr. Billich,
Sorry, Lori, no.
thank you. Mr. Booker,
No.
Mr. Butita,
Yes.
Mrs. Crosby,
Yes.
Mr. Fellers,
Yes.
Mr. Fiducia,
No.
Mr. Girl,
No.
Mrs. Gorel, Mrs. Gorel,
No.
thank you. And finally, Mr. Hoffman,
No.
thank you. Mr. Chairman, that is 5 yes and 15 no.
Motion fails. Thank you very much, Clerk Emau. And with that, we will move on to standing committee reports. Finance Committee, Mr. Salgado.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Finance Committee has 7 items today. The first one, the first 3 are resolutions for workman's comp related issues. So I'll start off with the first one. I move to approve resolution authorizing settlement of claim against the County of Winnebago entitled Stephen Wright versus Winnebago County in the amount of $96,443.48. And I so move.
We have a motion by Mr. Salgado on the resolution authorizing the settlement with Stephen Wright in the amount of 96,000 and change. A second by Mr. Hoffman. Any discussion by board members? Yes, sir, Mr. Girl.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I make a motion to take 2, 3, 4, and 5 together. We can read them all in separately, but they're all work comp related issues. So I'd make a motion to take those all at once.
2, 3, 4, and 5.
Yes.
Okay, so there's a motion by Mr. Girl to take the 4 settlements off the table. Or I'm sorry, to bundle them together, basically. Vote on them as one. May I please have a second? Mr. Zintak and Mrs. Crosby on the second. So motion and a second to package these together. We'll vote on this, Mr. Girl, because that wasn't brought forward by the chair of the committee. I'm sure there'll be support for it, but just so we're clear on the board floor. Is there any opposition to packaging these together? I do not see or hear any opposition. So we have put these 4 items on the table together. And if you'll allow, Mr. Salgado, I'll let you read those 4 in so we're on the same page about what will be before the board.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the first one, resolution authorizing settlement of claim against the County of Winnebago entitled Stephen Wright versus Winnebago County in the amount of $96,443.48. The second one is a resolution authorizing settlement of claim against the County of Winnebago entitled Pamela Thomas versus Winnebago County in the amount of $43,745.51. The next one's a resolution authorizing settlement of claim against the County of Winnebago entitled Marlene Brown versus Winnebago County in the amount of $80,781.43. And the last one is a resolution authorizing settlement of litigation DeMario Thompson versus Caruana in the amount of $11,350.
Okay, thank you. So we have the items 2, 3, 4, and 5, the 4 settlements. Any discussion on those, any of the 4? Mr. Arena.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Salgado, was there any dissenting votes in committee to approving these?
No, it was unanimous.
Thank you.
Any other discussion by board members? Seeing none, are there any board members who are opposed to this motion to approve 2, 3, 4, and 5 together? Seeing none, I will ask the clerk to cast a yes vote for this amended motion, which includes the passage of 2, 3, 4, and 5. Thank you very much. Motion passes unanimously. Mr. Salgado.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our next item is a resolution declining to approve the participation in the COPS grant, and I so move.
So we have a resolution to decline to approve participation in the COPS grant. May I have a second, please? Second by, I see Mr. McDonald's hand up in the back. I see Mr. Girl also with the second. So there's a motion and a second to on the resolution declining to approve participation in the COPS grant. Any discussion on that item? Maybe a quick overview, Mr. Salgado or Steve, on that particular item, so there's clarity on the floor.
Yeah, so real quickly, this grant was brought to us from the Sheriff's Department. Essentially what it is I believe, if I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Chapman, I believe it's a quarter by this grant is covered for 5 deputies. Essentially they would hire 5 deputies and it would cover the cost, I believe, a quarter, 25%, if I'm not mistaken. It might be a little bit greater than that. Then the county would be responsible for the remaining percentage. For the first 4 years, it would be covered 25 to 30%, I want to say. And then after that, you know, obviously we would have to make a decision if we want to keep those deputies in place or not. The total cost to the county, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Chapman, is about $1.7 million, I believe.
Yes.
So that's the cost to the county at this point in time with budget constraints. We just feel that it's unfeasible at this point to move with that COP grant. We can take every money that we can, but it's actually going to cost us a little bit more, and then future legacy costs that are associated with that. So that's where the decision was made from the finance committee. I think it was 4-3 was the vote. Just for full disclosure on the COPS grant. So that gives you an overview. I don't know if anybody has any other questions regarding that.
Any questions or comments by board members? I do not see any. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. McDonald there in the back, sir. Go ahead.
Thank you. Sorry about making this challenging doing it this way. As most of you know, I'm very pro public safety. The downside about this grant, we currently have 121 deputies. This would mean we have to go to 126. We could not fall below 126. I would love to be at 150, but with the COVID and the funding and everything else that's going on right now, I don't know that we can say for 100% sure we're going to be able to maintain 126 deputies for the next 5 years. It's rare that I ever do anything against public safety, but this one I think is not good for the county. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. Any other discussion or comments by board members? So a yes vote would decline participation, just to be clear, and a no vote would reject the declination. So with that, are there any board members who are opposed to the resolution before the board? I'm going to cast a yes or a no vote for Mr. Kelly, who is voting no. And then I believe we are going to, oh, and Mrs. Crosby is voting no. And then we are going to cast a yes vote for all other members present. So the motion on the resolution to declining to approve participation in the COPS grant has passed with 2 no votes, Mr. Kelly and Mrs. Crosby. So thank you very much. Go back to Mr. Salgado.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next 2 items are budget amendments to be laid over, and I'll read them. The first one's budget amendment ordinance 2020-022 mental health tax fund in the amount of $45,000. And then the other one is budget amendment ordinance 2020-020 sheriff's budget by $2,723,523. And those two are just first reading and they will be laid over.
Okay, thank you very much. We got the two items in for layover. Thank you. And I'll go back to, Steve, do you have your hand up?
Mr. Chairman, when you finish the finance report, Patrick's on the Zoom call.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Welcome, Pat. And we'll get right to you in just, Patrick, in 1 minute here. Good to have you with us. Okay, we've read in the two items to be laid over. Thank you very much, and we'll move on. I think I'll go back to Mr. Salgado.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That concludes our report, and just be on the lookout for the next Finance Committee meetings to talk about the budgets. So thank you.
Gotcha. Thank you very much. And with that, we do have our soon to be arriving new county administrator, Patrick Thompson, joining us this evening. Thanks, Steve, for coordinating getting Patrick with us this evening. And if the board will allow, I'll give you the floor to say hello to everybody. Oh, go ahead and unmute yourself.
There we go.
There we go.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, and thank you, Steve, for coordinating this. The email invite to the Zoom meeting went into my junk mail, so I apologize for that. I would have joined you sooner. I just wanted to take a few minutes to say hello to Chairman Haney and members of the board. I look forward to beginning my work with you on August 24th. I finish up work here in St. Croix County next Tuesday, and I will be joining you on the 24th of August. My wife, Mary, and I are very thrilled with the opportunity of joining the Winnebago County family. The process has been handled extremely well, Mr. Chairman, with Steve and Lorraine and Mike with the consulting firm. And I really look forward to starting work with you very soon. And I think things are moving along. We have purchased a home in Roscoe and will be residents of Winnebago County. And I look forward to it. I know we have lots of challenges facing us, but I think we have the team in place to get good things done, and I look forward to it. So I thank you for the opportunity for saying hello to members of the board. I met several members of the board during the interview process, and I look forward to meeting the rest of the board and working with all of you on the many challenges that are facing us. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much for joining us. Appreciated your comments this evening.
Thank you.
Yes, and glad you're with us. Stick around as long as you can, but we look forward to seeing you in person very soon.
Thank you.
Come on board.
With that, we will move on to our next item of business, the zoning committee, Mr. Webster.
I have no report, but I do want to say that last night, the Zoning Board of Appeals had their first live meeting since God knows when, way back in March. And so at the end of this month, was it 26th, I believe, then we will have our first live committee meeting as well. I'm going to follow the format that Troy Krupp and his department set up that for the zoning department. They did a fantastic job. So what they did last night was they had a number of applicants for zoning action, and they divided them up. And so they took, they had one of the staff members was acted like as a sergeant at arms. And so when people came into the room, they said, we're going to take this one case one by one, and we estimate it's going to take 30 minutes for this one. And so then there'll be a 5-minute break, whatever, and then we'll move on to the next one. So they had it scheduled there. So it was a live meeting, but in room 303, they had people separated far enough. And even when there was a number of people to come in and speak for or against one of the petitions, they still had it figured out. So it worked very well. Their meeting went well past 10 o'clock due to the fact that they had to schedule this. But Troy and his department did a yeoman's job of figuring that out. And so I thank them very much, and I will likely follow their format when we have our committee meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Webster. Economic Development Committee, Mr. Billick. Go ahead, sir. Oh, go ahead and there you go.
There we go. There we go. Sorry about that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Today we have 4 matters of business. We do have, I'd like to start off with the first item of business, which is a resolution abating property taxes on property located at 2647 8th Street, Rockford, Illinois, specifically identified as property code numbers 1502-226-005 and 1502-226-006. And I so move.
We got a motion by Mr. Billick on the resolution abating property taxes on 8th Street, a second by Mr. Girl. Thank you, Mr. Girl.
Tim Neighbors.
And Mr. Neighbors on the second as well. Any discussion or questions by board members on this resolution? Yes, sir, Mr. Schultz.
My comments relate to all of the agenda items related to abatements, and I promise I'll cut to the chase. My time on the board, I've heard it said repeatedly that we have to give these. We're over a barrel. We have no choice in the matter. If we don't, then Wisconsin or other neighboring states will steal our businesses. We also have to do it because we're taking a stand that we're pro-business, and we have to show it by taking these actions. My concerns are as follows. I believe it's a race to the bottom. If you give something, I'll give something more, and vice versa. It just goes on endlessly. It ignores the good corporate citizenship exercised by so many who never ask for anything. Those good corporate citizens understand that it requires money to provide the supporting services that they benefit from in this community. And I also want to take this chance to thank those companies, to publicly recognize that they've added jobs, some of them a large number of jobs. They've added large facilities, building projects, and they've never asked for a dime. They've done it because they believed it was the right thing to do for our community. And I think it's time that they were recognized. Another matter is I believe these abatements ignore the question of how loyal these companies really are and how long it will be until they look around for another offer. In addition, we need the revenue. We need the revenue now more than ever, and we're giving it away. And I don't think that's wise. We're going to have these budget cuts. We're going to have these hard conversations. And in the context of that, we're giving these tax dollars away. And finally, there's no definitive proof that they provide a net tax benefit. And especially when we consider the effect on other businesses who will line up behind the latest giveaway. Every time we do one of these abatements, or if we do a large abatement, we're communicating, we're telegraphing to the rest of our business community, you know, if you want to steward your corporate dollars, you're going to get in line. And I don't think that's wise for our community. Thanks for listening.
Thank you very much, Mr. Schultz. Just so you know, because you may not have been able to hear it, Mr. Schultz, when you're speaking, there's a little bit of a whistle that's coming through on when you speak. If you can't hear that, I just wanted you to be aware of that, sir. So sorry about that. Mr. Billick, I'll go back to you as the chair of the committee to offer any thoughts you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Actually, I appreciate it. I was going to talk, but I wanted to actually describe what this one is because it does not state which property it's in regards to. This is actually in regards to the Est Wing deal. This was to give a brief description, this is the deal that we actually were talking about discussing before. We did approve them for $150,000 from the host fees. It was a unanimous decision. And when we did that, actually, Steve on the county board floor, you were the only one that was a no. But and I get what you're saying, Steve. In regards to this one, this is an incremental tax abatement on this particular one, which actually coincides with the enterprise zone, which we were originally going to have available for that property. In that meantime, there was hiccups along the way. I mean, we were actually just now approving the enterprise zone on our end because of COVID and everything, and the time that it came in, we didn't have a chance to actually have it up earlier. At this stage, it is ready to be voted on for the enterprise zone. We did address that separately, but in regards to this particular item, this is actually in regards to Estwing. This was part of the discussion that we had when we approved them for the 150,000. The enterprise zone was going to be the tax abatement that we were going to be a part of just by entering the enterprise zone agreement with the city, which we did adjust that as well, which I'll discuss more when we get to that one. So this is basically kind of, we basically discussed and approved and understood that we were going to be part of that incremental tax abatement for that property already. But something along the way, it just didn't work out in a way that timing wise, they need to have it approved. And this is us basically saying we are giving that abatement that we already agreed to give them, which the city has already agreed to give theirs. And so has the school district. So this is kind of like a cleanup kind of situation. So we actually did approve this. This did go through unanimously on our committee. And again, this is in regards to Estwing, which has been in Rockford for 30 plus years. Steve, you're absolutely right. You know, taking on a new business, I have hesitations as well. But this is a business that's been here forever, and they were being pulled left and right to any other community to try to get them to open up because they saw how long they stayed here. Now they actually increased their taxing size. They are still paying the same amount of tax on their current property. This is an incremental tax abatement on their addition. So I just want to make sure that I clarify that portion of it.
Thank you, Mr. Billick. So the item before the board under Economic Development Committee is number 2. It is the resolution abating property taxes and 2647 8th Street in Rockford. Mr. Girl, I'll go to you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And if I'm not mistaken, this amount over 9 years was it totaled $16,000 from what I understood from Mr. Dornbush. So we're not talking about a enormous amount of money. This is a very small abatement for 9 years.
If I may say, yes,
Mr. Girl, go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Girl, you're absolutely right. At our meeting, that's exactly what we discussed. It is in the amount of about just north of $16,000. Which is on top of the 150,000 that we gave them from the host fees. So it is an incremental one over X amount of years. The bigger taxing body that's in regards to the property is the school district, and they're already giving their incremental abatement as well. So.
Thank you, Mr. Girl. Any other comments or questions by board members on item 2 on the 8th Street property? Seeing none, are there any board members who are opposed to this motion? I see Mr. Schultz as a no vote. Are there any other board members who are a no vote? I do not see or hear any objection on the Zoom screen, so I'm going to ask the clerk to cast a yes vote for all members present, with the exception of Mr. Schultz, who's a no vote. Motion passes. Thank you very much. I'll go back to Mr. Billick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our next matter of business, actually the next 3 items, I'm going to keep separate, even though they are in regards to the same thing. So I will, when I discuss them, it'll be kind of, it's the same description for all 3, but I'm going to take them individually. Our next matter of business is going to be a resolution authorizing execution of an intergovernmental agreement with the city of Rockford for real estate tax abatements in the Rockford Enterprise Zone, number 1. And I so move.
We got a motion by Mr. Billick on the resolution around an IGA with the city of Rockford for real estate abatements for Rockford Enterprise Zone number 1. Second by Mr. Girl and Mrs. Crosby. Item is now before this IGA is now before the board. Any questions or comments? Mr. Billick, I'll give you the first crack for a quick overview if you prefer.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, so this matter and the other matters that we're going to be discussing after this one all regard and revolve around the Enterprise Zone Agreement with the city of Rockford. The Enterprise Zone Agreement is basically similar to what Loves Park and McChesney Park has in a partnership. They have enterprise zones within their community. These are zones that aren't part of a TIF district or do not qualify for a TIF district type of abatement. However, they may be within that region. So this is kind of for the businesses that are still trying to beautify our areas and build up in those areas or try to purchase properties in those areas. And they are incremental. This is not you don't pay taxes for X amount of years. They're incremental. I do believe actually majority of them would be qualifying for only a 4-year abatement. And aside from it being an incremental one, again, these properties cannot be part of cannot collect on being a TIF district if they get enterprise zone, and an enterprise zone cannot be used in a TIF district. So there are those clarifications in there. So this isn't one of those situations where it's just taking advantage of the full tax amount. But it's a way to encourage businesses to come to our area. Like I said, the City of Loves Park and McChesney Park, they have a similar organized plan right now. We are not part of their plan. However, we are going to be extending that as well. So everybody knows for the future, we will be looking to Loves Park and McChesney Park and being a part of their enterprise zone as well. So that way we're all working with the entire community of Winnebago instead of just one city or another. So aside from that, these enterprise zones, they are 3 different zones, and they made sure that they kept them separate. We do have the zone 1, the I-90 competitive enterprise zone, as well as the river edge zone. Now, the third one, I know that you will see that it says, if you actually read in the agreement, actually part of that one was also including certain things that we actually opted out of, which was to make sure that we're not going to be a part of residential tax abatements. So it's going to be mainly only used for commercial. And we also made sure that we clarified in the language that it is going to be more towards non-retail type of abatements. So if it is a retail business, we stay along with exactly the discussion that we've had over many years of trying not to give retail businesses that portion of it. Instead, we're giving the tax abatements to more industrial places or businesses that are going to be actually coming to us to make sure that we're helping to help with economic development of the area around that business. So I just want to make sure that I clarify that as well. We also did add a 10-year sunset clause. So this in 10 years will be up for a revote. And if it didn't do anything to help us, or if it didn't align with what the county wants to do, then we would actually be able to opt out. And there's also an opt out before the 10 years if we decided to. However, we do have a clause on there to revote on this.
Got it. Thank you for the overview there. Any questions or comments on the IGA with Rockford around the Enterprise Zone 1? Yes.
May I ask a question, please?
Yes, I have Mr. Arena, then I have Mrs. Gorel. I'll get right to you, Mrs. Gorel. Go ahead, Mr. Arena.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I had a conversation with Mr. Schultz today about this, and he raises important points that he just raised tonight. What we're doing as part of with this process, signing our authority to grant a tax abatement to the City of Rockford. So for 10 years, they're going to be making on our behalf that would be coming to us. And as Mr. The dire financial situation in what we do, I was hoping Mr. Dornbush would be.
Excuse me, Mr. Arena, hold on one second. Mrs. Rudd, I ask you to put your mute on if that's okay.
Oh, what town are you talking about?
If everybody could mute their phone except for Mr. Arena. Go ahead and mute your phone unless you're Mr. Arena. Go ahead. Mr. Arena, go ahead.
So I think it's worthwhile for us to look more closely at what the payback historically has been on abatements granted, since we're, 10 years is a long commitment. And with that being said, and since Mr. Dornbush isn't here tonight to answer these questions, I would move that we lay over these last 3 so we could get answers to those questions.
So there's a motion that I have by Mr. Arena. The motion is to lay over items 3, 4, and 5, which includes the item that is before us now, plus the next 2 that are before us. The motion is to lay over for 2 weeks. It would come back at the next board meeting. May I have a second on the motion? A second by Mr. Zintak. and Mr. Webster, and Mr. Schultz. So we have a motion and a second to lay over.
Mr. Chairman, I am here just for the record.
Oh,
I
okay.
didn't hear the questions.
Thank you very much. So would you like to, Mr. Arena, I just want to go back to you to honor the spirit of your motion. Do you want to ask some questions now and then decide if you want to bring forward your motion, or would you want to continue with the motion you made?
I would like to ask the questions.
Okay, I'm going to give you the floor right back. I'm going to back off that motion to lay over, and we'll come back to it. If Mr. Arena wants to bring it forward after we've asked some questions, we'll go ahead and do that. We won't move on to anything else until you have the opportunity to decide on that. Mr. Arena, you have the floor.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Ms. Dornbush, Mr. Schultz has raised this question of what historically has been our payback on abatements that we've given. Do we have data that shows that it's in the county's best interest to do it?
As far as how would you want to measure it, I guess, because we gave them a tax abatement, they created so many jobs, or?
Well, yeah. So if we give an abatement and it costs us $100,000 in tax revenue, is there greater than $100,000 benefit in some, on some other side? I mean, how are we measuring whether or not this makes good financial sense for us to do?
I don't have that specific data, but I can look into it and see for a period of time. I guess it depends on what type of payback you're looking at. TIF districts, for example, are 23 years. Are you looking at a 23-year period, or are you looking at a quick turnaround time? It kind of depends on what parameters you want to look at to measure it.
I guess I'm curious, when somebody approaches the county and asks for a tax abatement, what process do we go through to decide if it makes financial sense for us to do it?
Well, for instance, for Est Wing that came through the previous one, they are investing $11 million into expansion of their building. With the $11 million that they're with employment increasing, capital investment, building expansion, we're looking at, for a tax abatement for them, was $16,000 over 9 years. So they're investing 11 million, but it's $16,022 was the estimated abatement over a 9-year period of time for this schedule. So we are looking at what they're investing and seeing what the cost would be in comparison to seeing we try to make it so it's obviously not upside down.
Okay. But moving forward with these 3 proposals, we won't be doing any type of analysis. It'll be in the hands of the city of Rockford, correct?
It will be in the IGAs. There's language in there that the zoning administrator, so each enterprise zone has a zone administrator, will report to the Economic Development Committee 1 time a year or more as requested. And that's kind of how the metrics would work. You can see how they're performing it, how they're using it. If the county is unsatisfied with how it's being used, there is an out clause, a 30-day written notice to them to address that issue, or the sunset clause after 10 years. But City of Rockford would have the authority. The county board would transfer the authority over to the City of Rockford for the increment abatement schedule.
Okay. Well, thank you. I think that does help clarify for me what my concerns were. And in light of that, I will withdraw my motion.
Thank you, Mr. Arena. Thank you, Mr. Dornbush. I do have Mrs. Gorel. Then I have Mr. Fellers. Mrs. Gorel, are you still there?
Yes, thank you. I have so many questions on this. I hope everyone on our board understands what it was coming, what this is all about. Have you taken a look at the maps? Have you seen where they're asking for these improvements and where they aren't asking for them? If we gave S-Wing, which I understand, it has been a long-standing business here, and we gave them $100,000 to expand, which I think is wonderful. But again, during this period, and let's go back to those that we have given before, Chris, because I know we've done a lot of this. I'd like to see some type of a record from before, that if we had 10 businesses that we gave them tax abatement, how it was used. Did they actually hire people, and how many did they retain, and how much did they cost us? Because I see down the line that if we do what all three of these are asking of us, we're going to have a problem in our future. Because if we do this just for Rockford, we're going to have to do it for other municipalities. They're also going to be asking us to do. So I really would like to know, there's a couple I know that we've given big tax, and then they came back when it was tax time and didn't want to pay what the taxes were due. And so we had a dilly-dally, go to court and hearings and everything else in order to prove that they did owe those taxes. And so I'd like to see more understanding for all of you who don't understand it like I don't. Perhaps we can have more explanation of what all this is telling us. But I want to see what businesses we have previously done and what our return on the dollar was. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Gorel. I have Mr. Fellers. Then if it's okay, I'll go to Mr. Fellers, and then I need to go back to the committee chair, Mr. Billick. Go ahead, Mr. Fellers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Chris, thank you for being here. A quick question. I mean, the idea here with these three zones is that these are underperforming zones from a tax perspective as it is, right? They are identified as areas of development where it takes a longer term investment to bring in potential businesses so that we can make them more productive on the tax rolls. And the idea here being that the abatement, both from the city of Rockford and the city of Winnebago County, will help encourage new businesses to come into these areas, give them a little bit of a head start by easing their initial tax burden so they can become productive, productive in the sense of making sure that they are eventually paying their full fair share of their property tax. Is that an accurate description?
Yes, that is an accurate description. These are areas that the city of Rockford's trying to entice. My understanding is that the city, Rockford Public School District, as well as the Rockford Park District, is as well looking to participate, but they wanted to see how the county proceeds with this. The city of Rockford already has this established. So we're kind of the second one through if it goes through. But the other two are looking at it as well. This is the same abatement that S-Wing was approved, and the city, the Park District, and the Rockford Public School District had already approved that. So we are kind of on the last leg of that one to get approved.
And just as a follow-up then, so you'd say it's safe to say that these are areas that are underperforming from a property tax revenue perspective, and that this is one of the strategies that we have as a county and as a region to encourage economic development within these underperforming regions.
These areas they're looking to entice development. They may not be fully underdeveloped. Well, they're not. Some of the areas may not be developed yet. But a lot of it is already developed and looking to be redeveloped. But there are areas along I-90 that are crop fields.
Great. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Billick, on a follow-up, I'll go back to you. Then I have Mr. Salgado, and then it sounds like Mrs. Gorel has a follow-up as well. Go ahead, Mr. Billick.
Yeah, I just wanted to, just in a matter of some of the things that were brought up so far, I just want to make sure that I have Chris actually verify this as well, that this is basically based on an incremental tax abatement based on companies that are expanding or companies that are building out in these areas. Now, these areas that are part of these enterprise zones are areas or properties that will not qualify for a TIF or anything like that. So this increment that's under the enterprise zone increment is actually less, but it's actually making sure that it uses all of the communities that are involved. So obviously it would be from the school district, park district, county, and the city. When you look at the percentage of what comes out of each, this is, again, incremental. This is not a full 100% tax abatement on this property, which I know the county has done before. I know the county's also done 10 to 20 year tax abatements. I know tax abatements have not been used in the county a lot recently, and we had a discussion on many committee meetings that we wanted to stay away from using host fees a bit more and try to make sure that we can actually make sure that they're available for more projects so we can spread them out instead of using a lot of the host fees, hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in a 20-year commitment. This way we're actually focusing on the tax abatement and not the tax abatement of the entire property, but the incremental of the adjusted property tax after construction and everything. So I just want to make sure I clarify that. So this is not taking away from the county's pocket right off the bat. It is not in full. It is one of those percentages where we're all chipped in within this agreement, and we all are part of it to where we all have a percentage that comes out, and it's incremental, meaning we still get paid extra on the property taxes once they did the new construction and so on. I did want to make sure that I made that clarification. And then I believe that's it for right now.
Thank you. I got Mr. Salgado. Before I give the floor to Mr. Salgado, I was part of the early discussion in January 2019. I've not been part of discussions much since then, but I do know a primary reason in the ask is speed to market, is that when there is competition with other communities or existing employers that are primary job employers are looking to expand. I do know the discussion was centered around manufacturing, advanced manufacturing, logistics, healthcare, and aerospace, and primary job growth was a big part of the discussion. I haven't been privy lately, but I do know that one of the concerns by municipal partners is that, well, we're going around to multiple boards getting approvals. Communities we're competing against have a package or a one-stop shop, and they're faster. And sometimes that's a factor, sometimes it's not. And so I would just caution, if in 10 years this has been used for one municipality to rip retail from another municipality and we're just trading dollars, I think that would be unproductive and not strategic. If it does more of the other part, the primary job growth, or it could be justified, I think that makes a little more sense. So anyway, I didn't mean to cut in front of you too hard. Mr. Salgado, go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You did answer one of my questions, which I'm assuming is a streamlined process because the park district and the school district wants to jump on board and kind of put these city of Rockford enterprise zones. So that was going to be one of my questions to Chris Dornbush, but that kind of has been answered from that perspective. Chris, from this perspective, if we didn't have these abatement enterprise zones, the process would still come through the economic development, but it would just go through each institution, right? The park district, the county as a whole. Is that what the process would be if we didn't have these abatements, enterprise zones?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes. So if by transferring your authority over to the city of Rockford, it would just be more like a one-stop shop. It would just go through. They could assign it based on the schedule that's before you without having to go to each individual board to help speed up the process a bit. Otherwise, it would just come through each board process, which can still get done. It just takes a little bit more time to do so.
Thank you, Mr. Dornbush. And just a comment on that. So I kind of understand the concern from Mr. Schultz and Mr. Arena aspect of it is giving ourselves authority someone to decide which companies essentially, would get these tax abatements, and it would impact, those institutions, their revenue, their tax levies, of course, from the tax abatements. So I understand what that process is. I also see it as kind of like zoning. We have zoning areas. If not, each particular individual would have to, state their case if it's agriculture or commercial, whatever the zones. So I kind of understand the philosophy under that, but I do understand the concern from Mr. Arena, Mr. Schultz, in particular, someone's dictating and making decisions on behalf where it would not be advantageous potentially. I'm not saying that it is or not. Potentially could be a disadvantage to the levy on the county as a whole. But I do understand the whole process of streamlining, but I also think that there needs to be direction and make sure return on investment, more importantly, what are we getting out of those metrics that Chris kind of alludes to? Do you want to talk about job creation? Do you want to talk about investment? Do you want to talk about all that needs to be into account? And as long as, there is some sort of check and balance there, I don't see there's an issue with that. But I do see the concern that we're actually giving authority for the city of Rockford, same with the school district and the park district, just allowing the city of Rockford to make those decisions. And I understand the streamlined process. So with that being said, I just wanted to ask those questions and you clarified that, Mr. Haney. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Salgado. Mrs. Gorel, you had a follow-up?
Yes, I did, because as I look at this map, I see where the River Edge Development Zone is. That's basically been a TIF area for, in fact, there's several TIFs down there. And as I look at the Enterprise Zone 1, many of those areas have been TIFs. And we didn't get it too far with any of those TIFs. Do you feel that by doing the abatement that we're going to get any further with them when we couldn't with TIF areas?
And I'd refer that to Chris.
Chris, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The enterprise zone already is designated by the state. So these zones are already designated and approved by the state. There's already benefits with having them. The tax abatement is just an additional one that they're going through to try to get included. For example, an enterprise zone is different than a TIF district. Enterprise zone, you can, the zone administrator can also discount the building sales tax material or building material sales tax. So there's other aspects of incentives that come with an enterprise zone. The abatement is just another tool in their toolbox, so to speak. And the TIFs, there are, especially in the downtown area, there are TIFs that do encompass some of these areas, but the TIF would supersede the enterprise zone. So an abatement wouldn't be able to, you couldn't do an abatement as well as get the TIF benefits as well.
Yes, thank you very much, Chris. And I do see Mr. Schultz has his hand up. I'll go right to him. Mr. Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What I heard Mr. Dornbush say was that, yeah, on the Estwing thing, we're the last to the table. But as it relates to these enterprise zones, which is a huge thing in front of us, we're second in line. So it's only Rockford that's already approved this. And what I heard Mr. Dornbush say in addition was that the school district and the park district are both waiting to see how we handle this before we move ahead. And I think that's telling because they're the ones who are the largest recipients of the real estate tax revenue. But my specific question then, in light of that, is if the park district and or the school district don't approve including this authority, passing this authority to Rockford, do they keep just our authority or do they give that back to us?
Go ahead, Chris, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. They would still have it unless they wanted to give it up, or if there's language in the IGA that if the board was unhappy, you could terminate the contract within 30 days of written notice.
Okay, I'll go back to Mr. Schultz.
Yeah, I would really strongly recommend that we amend what's in front of us. And I'll make that motion that we amend this to say that the agreements, we would add a clause to each of the 3 agreements in front of us that says, if in fact the park district or the school district do not give away their authority, that in that event, we would take back our authority as well.
So we have a motion. I'll take that as a motion by Mr. Schultz, a motion to add language related to the commitment from the county being contingent upon the commitment from the Park District and the Rockford School District 205. That is a motion by Mr. Schultz. I believe I see Mr. Webster's hand up as a second to that motion.
Yes.
So we have a motion and a second. And I believe Mrs. Crosby is a second as well. So Mr. Dornbush has his hand up and wants a clarification. Chris?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just for clarification, there would probably need to be at least some type of time span of how long you are willing to wait if for the motion to clarify it, because they could wait 2 years or they could wait 2 months. We all have our processes with taxing bodies to go through committee and then their boards. So just a suggestion.
All right, I would amend my motion to say if either of these parties do not approve within the next 6 months, that we would retract our authority from the city of Rockford.
So the motion by Mr. Schultz, then just so we're clear on the floor, is that within 6 months, that 205 and the Park District will approve. If they do not, then the county is out. And I believe Mr. Webster still seconds the spirit of that motion, as does Mrs. Crosby. So we have a motion and a second. I see a couple hands up, and I just want to be clear. Mr. Arena, you have a question or you would like to second?
Sorry about that.
It's okay.
For clarification, I
Okay.
thought I heard Mr. Schultz say if either of the parties, did he mean both of the parties? They both have to do it or we're out, or if one or the other does it, we're still in, so that I understand.
I want them both to do it.
Okay, thank you.
So we're all in or we're all out, or we're all in or they're all in or the county is out.
You can add me as a second on that one as well.
Okay, add Mr. Billick as a second. So we have multiple seconds to Mr. Schultz's motion to add that language. Is there any other discussion about the amended motion that is before the board? Oh, yes, sir, Mr. Fellers.
Yeah, I guess I'm just curious why it matters. I mean, these are areas that we want to promote economic development. You know, they're not performing from a tax purpose already. So are we saying, well, let's just let Rockford go at it by themselves and hopefully we can reap the benefit? Or are we saying we want to actually be part of the solution? I mean, what I'm hearing here is a bunch of people saying, oh God, I hope we can't be part of this solution, or I hope everyone else goes along. I mean, we're the largest of the government bodies here. We should be leading on these efforts rather than waiting for the Park District or waiting for the school district to get involved. And this is our job to be leaders, not followers.
So that was your statement against. Okay, so then Mr. Billick has his hand up. I'll go back to Mr. Billick, and then I'll get to you, Mr. Webster.
Yeah, I just wanted to add in, Dan, I get where you're coming from, and I agree that, you know, we want to be proactive no matter what. However, if it appeases and if this is basically in essence a negotiation, if we can add that part in there to make sure that everybody's happy, safe and sound, that's why I seconded it as well. We were put under the gun months ago, but then because of coronavirus and everything like that, and with state's attorney's office being bombarded with a lot of other things to deal with, it took a little bit longer to get this finished. And they did an excellent job finding all these little things that we actually changed and adjusted, just so all county board members understand. They actually spent months on this enterprise zone deal, and they actually were able to add much more different language And we actually verified and checked with the city to make sure that they understand, and if they agree or if they had any concerns. There's a ton of discussion over that, and we were actually able to make this something that would answer most of the county board members' typical questions in regards or concerns in regards to doing tax abatements. I just want to clarify that.
Yes. I'm sorry, I got Mr. Webster. Thank you, Mr. Billick. I got Mr. Webster, then Mr. Arena. Mr. Webster.
Yeah, thank you. And I understand what Dan's saying there.
It's Mr. Fellers, Mr. Webster, please.
Oh, okay. Is that what?
Thank you.
Said?
Go ahead, Mr. Webster.
So at any rate, I understand what he's saying, but on the other hand, when I see that we are in the tank as far as our budget goes, we're looking at $8 million hole in our budget. The city's got a hole in their budget. All the other taxing bodies, I think, are pretty much in the same shape there. And I'm no financial wizard, but I look around at things there and thinking, can we really afford to be giving up abatements on anything really at this point? And so, I just look at where we're going to be. Where we're going to be now to plug these holes in our budgets. And so if Steve, who I have the total respect for when it comes to finance, I'm not a financial wizard. Steve is. And I've generally tried to follow his line of reasoning and so forth. And 9 out of 10 times, it makes plenty of sense to me. And so if he's finding some fault, even if they're minor, I have to listen to what he's saying to me there. And I think that when we just saw what happened with these seconds, including from the seconds from Jazz and from Paul, and Gene, and everybody was seconding that. So that tells me that he's onto something. And I think we ought to listen to what he's got to say. He's got some sage advice when it comes to finance. And I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Webster. I think Mr. Arena had his hand up as well. Go ahead, Mr. Arena.
Oh, just procedural question. If I understand, we're considering these 3 enterprise zones separately. They're not in front of us together. Mr. Schultz's motion, does it apply to just the first one, or can he motion now to have it apply to all 3?
I believe his intent, and Mr. Schultz, correct me if I'm wrong, was that they would apply to all, but I don't want to. Okay, the motion would be that they would apply in separate votes, which we will clarify very clearly on the board floor when we get to 4 and 5 as well. The item before us is a motion and a second on the applying the contingency of they're in or we're out, mindset within 6 months. And if it's okay, if there's going to be any clarity or any issue with this, we could always split it out. I guess it's somebody's recommendation for 4 and 5, but I do believe his intention was that for this discussion and the other 2, that it would come to the board with that understanding baked in.
Right, that was my understanding too. I just want to make sure we don't make any type of procedural error and not apply this condition to the other 2 as well. Thank you.
If the board passes this change, we will absolutely read that in. So it's a matter of record and it'll be very clear. There'll be no way we could misunderstand that. I do believe I see another hand up. Mr. Fellers, I'll go back to you a second time. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A quick question for Mr. Dornbush, just for clarification. These abatements are on new developments within these zones. They do not affect the current development that is in these zones. Is that accurate?
Yes, that is correct. It's just for new investments, whether it's expansion or brand new construction on a untouched site.
So to that end, then we're not actually giving up any revenue. Anything that would come in from property taxes to this budget, we are going to continue to retain the same property tax payments from these parcels that are in these economic development zones. What we're giving up, what we are saying is, if you create new development in these zones, we will abate your taxes for a period of time as determined by the IGA. But we're not actually giving up any money. This is a way of encouraging people to spend more and to hire more and to create new jobs via manufacturing and create new jobs via the construction. And I'm listening to board members saying, why would we do anything? I don't understand why any board member would be against that, right? Because we want to encourage growth so that we don't backslide, and we're reinvesting in ourselves and doing what we can make sure that our property base, tax base continues to grow. And then we collect on this development over time after the abatement ends, right? We're not losing any money off of what we're currently getting. We're making it so people can spend more money in these areas.
Thank you, Mr. Fellers. Can I ask Chris a question? Give me the rough, I'm looking right at it, I think under Exhibit B, but can you give the rough outline of what zone 1 is? I just want everybody to be read in. What area are we exactly talking about? You know, if you could do that for me.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, they can be connected through right-of-ways and utility ways. So enterprise zone number 1 kind of snakes all around, to be perfectly honest with you. River's Edge redevelopment zone is really concentrated downtown, kind of between the 15th Avenue, Whitman Bridge on the east and west side of the river. And it does snake up to North Town, and then the I-90 enterprise zone is over by Riverside in I-90 between Riverside and East 8th Street at different patches on east and west of I-90.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments by board members? Yes, sir, Mr. Schultz. I'll go back to you second time, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to address Mr. Feller's concern, one of the things I've seen in my time in this community is we've had companies, sometimes long-standing in the community, move from an existing site into the TIF district or into a location that is tax favored and abandoned existing facilities and take advantage of that. And some have done that more than once. So it is not necessarily just a lily white environment where it's only new jobs, only new development. And I've seen that happen in my tenure.
Thank you very much, Mr. Schultz. Any other questions? I see Mr. Fellers, I'll go back to you a third time quickly.
And then thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chris, I just want to know if the current language in the IGA reflects, is literal a new development, or does it affect, someone moving from one area within the county to another, or one area within the city to another?
Theoretically, if you moved from outside the enterprise zone into one, but you expanded or invested X amount of dollars into it that are spelled out in the schedule, either $500,000 or $2.5 million, and you met the job growth criteria or the job growth requirement, you could potentially obtain those abatements.
But it requires a significant investment and significant job growth to do that, correct?
That's correct. Yes, it requires either $500,000 for level 1, or if you're level 2 eligible, it's $2.5 million minimum. Plus, there's job criteria tied to it.
So just thank you very much, Chris. Thank you, Mr. Fellers. The item before the board is not to approve or not. It's to do we want to amend via Mr. Schultz's recommendation or his motion to go with an all-in within 6 months approach or not. So a yes vote would approve of Mr. Schultz's motion. Then separately, we would either approve or disapprove of the actual motion. So we're only dealing with his amendment to change things to include and say, hey, you either all are in Park District and 205, or we're out within 6 months, or not. A yes vote changes it to, as Mr. Schultz directed. A no vote would leave it as was brought to the board this evening. So with that, I do not see any other hands up. So I will, are there any board members who are opposed to Mr. Schultz's motion? Are there any board members who want to vote no to the motion Mr. Schultz brought forward? I see Mr. Fellers is a no. Mr. Girl is a no. And that is all the objection I see or hear. So we are going to ask the clerk to cast a yes vote for all members present minus Mr. Girl and Mr. Fellers. So we have amended the original motion to, I guess, the Schultz amendment to include an all in or all out for the Park District in 205 within 6 months. Now it comes back to an amended motion, which is to approve the IGA, which has now been amended to include that language, the Schultz amendment, around Zone 1. Is there any final discussion on approving or disapproving of the amended motion before the board? Yes, sir, Mr. Arena.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was reading through the documents and I thought I had read before the types of businesses we're excluding were retail and residential and service businesses. But I didn't find it again tonight. So if Mr. Dornbush can clarify, is that correct? Are service businesses, retail, and residential excluded from these abatements?
Or go ahead, Chris.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Rockford had put it together. Service businesses were not included in their proposal, so that is not included in there. The residential development as well as the retail commercial were removed in the draft that's before you. It's in the Rockford proposal for those two, but as far as the county's language actually pulls that out, so it would not apply to them how it stands before you right now.
And I'd just like to comment on that. I understand we've had debates before about whether we incentivize retail businesses, and I think some of it has to be kind of case specific. We don't need to be subsidizing a big box store or an apartment complex on I-90, but when we're looking at the River's Edge district, I think small retail businesses in an urban environment that might have a couple of apartments above in a building might be worthy of some type of incentive. I think those types of neighborhoods have greater challenges to redevelop, and I don't think we should be limiting ourselves too much there. I'm not going to vote no over it because of that, but I think in my conversation with Mr. Dornbush, he said we could look at those on a case-by-case basis, and I think we need to keep an open mind for those types of businesses and not just say that we absolutely are not going to provide subsidies for those other uses. Thank you.
So to follow up Mr. Arena's point is, Chris, confirm for me if you could, if we had an exception to Mr. Arena's thing, like just it makes total business sense for the county to consider something that would be excluded in this current agreement within this enterprise zone, they could bring a separate package to the county for consideration, and we could make a determination outside of this parameter. So in this case, we'd reserve authority, but we could always give it on a one-off basis in the future. We'd reserve the right to then have to weigh in if there would ever be that exception moment that came forward. Is that correct, sir?
That is correct, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Yeah, you could do it at a one-off. The schedule is kind of the checks and balances that you must meet this to be eligible for it. If a shop wanted to come in and it was a worthwhile, the board thought it was a worthwhile investment or incentive, you could do a one-off specifically to them, but it would go through the county board process. Rockford wouldn't be able to approve it on that behalf. Yes.
Thank you. Thank
May
you.
I ask one question?
Yeah, go ahead, Mrs. Gorel, you're up.
Would this also, when you're talking about the River's Edge and some of these other areas that are in Enterprise One, if they're receiving tax credits, will they still be able to ask for an abatement?
The question is around exclusions. Chris, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If they're receiving TIF incentives, that would supersede an abatement. You couldn't receive the TIF incentives as well as the a tax abatement.
There's also tax credits that they can receive. Are you saying that because I know a lot of places what they depend on in restoring and rebuilding are tax credits. So is there a difference between a TIF and a tax credit?
I think you may be referring to the historic tax credit, Ms. Gorel. I'm not quite sure on how that is. The city of Rockford would handle that because it would fall under their authority within the city. So I'm not exactly positive on the answer to your question.
Thank you.
A company looking in this zone would not be excluded from chasing state and federal incentives or things that are temporary in nature unless it's written in here that it's excluded. That would be my understanding. And a lot of times in large manufacturing deals, you're going to have people chasing money at different levels of government. Mr. Billick? Go ahead, Mr. Billick. Oh, you're still on mute, sir. There you go.
Sorry, I apologize. I meant to say I'm going to refer over to Mr. Fellers, but I have one small comment I'd like to make after that. That's all.
Sure, go ahead, Mr. Fellers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Chairman. And to be clear here, just from a strategy point, I mean, we're talking a minimum investment of $500,000, right? I mean, this isn't designed towards, you know, the smaller mom and pop retail shops. This is going after like significant, you know, someone making a significant property investment within these regions, right? I mean, that's what we're talking much larger than just, you know, a corner side shop or an expansion off of City Market. You know, we want people actually coming in with a significant jobs, you know, type opportunity. So even, you know, so I mean, you know, while I know we can make exceptions and such, right? I mean, that $500,000 seems like a fairly high bar to hit for some of the kinds of, like, you know, smaller retail investment we're talking about.
Which is excluded anyway. It's a very good point. Did I miss a hand? Oh, Mr. Billick, go ahead, sir.
Yes, actually. Yes, actually, I just found the spot where it said that portion where it breaks it down what the level of investments are, and yes, they are pretty up there. I actually just wanted to make one comment. There was actually a business on the west side that I've been dealing with recently, and I managed to fall in my lap just by accident through a friend. They were actually looking to expand in our region, and they were actually being proposed the enterprise zone by someone from the city, and even the enterprise zone didn't cut the cake compared to what they were going to get in Indiana, or I'm sorry, Iowa. So they're actually going to be looking at a separate state altogether. And no matter what we tried to do and what the city tried to do and try to adjust and turn around, and whether it be on a new property or whether it be on just expanding on their current property, and we couldn't even beat the competition whatsoever. And they're still going to keep their factory open here on the west side. They're still going to keep their Rockford base. However, they're going to be moving their new operations with 250 new employees that they're going to be hiring at that spot, and it's going to be over 250,000 square feet. And we haven't completely lost it yet. Still, I don't know exactly what's going on with that. The city was trying to fix it now after I notified them a little bit on that. But you're talking about a 200 to 250,000 square foot building that would have gone more than likely on the west side to coincide with their current property. And enterprise zone are type of things that at least open the door to discuss with some of these companies. And at the end of the day, I mean, it's competitive nature that this is economic development. It's all about competition and negotiations. And, you know, sometimes we can't be giving away everything. And when my friend told me about this project, I told him if I can't do anything, I can't do anything. because at the end of the day, sometimes, you know, our hands are tied as much as they can be. So this is just an opportunity, another opportunity where we can possibly benefit expanding current businesses in our area and possibly bringing in new businesses, knowing that they can expand here and get this enterprise zone type of abatement. So.
Thank you very much. Any other questions or comments? What is before the board is the amended motion around the IGA with Rockford Zone 1, which includes an all-in or all-out language with the partners, the Park District and the school district within 6 months. Any other quick comments? With seeing no other hands up, are there any board members who are opposed to this motion? I do want to note Mr. Schultz is asking to vote no on this resolution, and I do not see or hear any other objection. So we will ask the clerk to cast a yes vote for all other members present. The amended motion passes and now is adopted by the board, and the 6 months clock will begin. So thank you very much. I'll go back to Mr. Billick for item 4.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And yes, moving on to item 4, that would be the resolution authorizing execution of an intergovernmental agreement with the city of Rockford for real estate tax abatements in the Rockford I-90 competitive enterprise zone. And I so move.
Thank you. Mr. Billick's resolution authorizing IGA with the city for real estate tax abatements in Rockford I-90 competitive enterprise zone. I will include in the language, so it's part of the record, that this is an all-in or all-out within 6 months with the same 2 partners, the Park District and the school district. We have a motion by Mr. Billick. May I have a second, please? Thank you, Mr. Zintak. We have a motion, a second by Mr. Zintak. Is there any discussion by board members? I think we covered it on the previous one pretty well. So are there any board members opposed to this motion? Mr. Schultz and Mr. Kelly, we will cast a no vote for Mr. Schultz, Mr. Kelly, and Mr. Webster, and we will cast a yes vote for all other members present. So item 4 around I-90 competitive enterprise zone, that has passed with the amended language that was discussed now multiple times. So thank you very much. Motion passes. I'll go to Mr. Billick for item 5.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Moving on to item number 5, which is a resolution authorizing execution of an intergovernmental agreement with the city of Rockford for real estate tax abatements in the River Edge redevelopment zone number 1, and I so move.
Got a motion by Mr. Billick on the IGA around real estate tax abatements, River Edge development zone number 1. May I have a second, please? Second by Mr. Girl. Thank you, Mr. Girl. Item is now before the board for discussion. I do want to note for the record, I will go to Mr. McDonald here in 1 second. Sorry about that. That we want to absolutely include an all-in or all-out language within 6 months for the Park District and the school district. As we did with number 3 and number 4, we will also do it with item 5, which is the River Edge redevelopment zone. Mr. McDonald, did I steal your thunder on that? Okay, sorry about that. I should have read that in right away, but I'll go to you, Mr. McDonald. Go ahead. Or Mr. Billick, whoever wants to take the floor there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I need to abstain from this vote. My current employer is in this zone, so I wish to abstain from this vote.
We're going to have the clerk note that Mr. McDonald's abstaining from this vote. We'll allow that, no problem. Any other? So we have a motion and a second on the River Edge redevelopment zone number 1, including the all-in or all-out language. Any discussion by board members? Okay, Mr. McDonald is an abstention. Are there any board members who are opposed to this motion? Please indicate. Thank you. Mr. Schultz is a no vote. Mr. Webster is a no vote. We will cast a yes vote for all other members present. Thank you very much. Motion passes. I'll go back to you, Mr. Billick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and that concludes our report.
Thank you very much. That concludes the Economic Development Committee. I'll go to Operations Administrative Committee. Mr. McDonald.
Operations has no report. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Billick, just back to you. There's an email, check an email I sent to you and Chris today, and let's talk over the weekend and see what works for you. And then moving ahead to operations, thank you, Mr. McDonald, no report. Public Works Committee, Mr. Tassoni.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Your Public Works Committee has no report this evening. I'm anticipating our next committee meeting to be on August 18th. But what I would like to add is that I inquired with County Engineer Molina regarding with the current storms and tornadoes that went through surrounding counties and areas, and I asked them what involvement we may or may not have. But I guess we are, your county highway department is a member of what's called the Illinois Public Works Mutual Aid Network. And regarding disasters or things that may happen in our surrounding counties, our assistance would be requested, and at this time it has not been. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tassoni. Appreciate that. Public Safety Committee, Mr. Booker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's only two items that I bring forward, but they're not actually from the committee. It's just a matter of information. I shared it in caucus the other night that we have confirmed from the federal government, the Department of Justice, revenue for Winnebago County to the general fund just for the month of July alone is $219,608. And that is for payment for the federal inmates that are housed in the Winnebago County Jail. If we keep up that pace at a 12-month period, that results in, I believe it was $2.6 million for Winnebago County General Fund. So I'd like to, I want the board to keep that in mind, that revenue is also to be used to keep the jail staffed properly. The federal government, the U.S. Marshals were very direct in informing us that if staffing levels should drop off, that we could possibly lose that type of revenue and lose those inmates. So that's positive news. I'd like to stay in the positive end of it. And the other item I'd like to mention is positive news regarding the Chinese virus that we're all dealing with, and that is, it looks like for the state of Illinois, our recovery rate is at 95%. For Winnebago County, it's 96.3% of recorded cases. That is the recovery rate. Their targeted beds are at 20% is what their target is, but right now in Illinois, we are at 50%. And I think it's very important for our officials to keep the positive news, keep the public informed of the positive news, as well as the number of cases that continue to be reported on a daily basis. So that's all I have from public safety. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Booker. We'll move on to Personnel Policy Committee, Mr. Fiducia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We do not have a report. However, we will be having a meeting next Tuesday, and I would also invite the board. I believe it's going to be Tuesday at 2. Ms. Goro could probably confirm and update you on that. We're going to have a River Bluff advisory meeting, so no report for our committee.
It'll be in room 303.
Okay, we'll look for announcement on the River Bluff Advisory Committee meeting. We will look for an announcement on the Personnel Policy Committee meeting. Thank you very much, Mr. Fiducia. Any new business by board members? Okay, with that, oh, Mr. Arena, sorry about that. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to bring to everyone's attention, I discussed this in caucus, but probably haven't talked to everyone. We had a budget amendment in finance that was laid over today for additional monies that was spent by the Sheriff's Department. I know that we don't have a plan to offset that other than spending down our reserves. I have asked Mr. Chapman to prepare a resolution, and Mr. Salgado has agreed to bring it into finance next week to find budget reductions to offset that expenditure. I think if we're going to be spending down our reserves, we need to have a very specific conversation of what the consequences to that. So I want the rest of the board to know that this will be a part of the conversation, next finance meeting, and hope that you'll participate and think about, what we might look to pay for this. I think we need to plan now to change our spending before we get to a real crisis level in terms of what we have left in reserves. And anyone who's interested in joining as a sponsor on this, I would appreciate your support. Thank you.
Mr. Arena, if I could ask a follow-up, so I understand you, and I apologize if this comes off as inarticulate, but you're asking Steve to create a scenario plan that would make an offsetting 2.7 million in cuts in this existing fiscal year 20 budget that ends September 30th? Or are you, and if I missed it, I'm sorry, I missed the conversation. Or are you saying, show us a scenario of what that would look like going forward into fiscal year 2021? And I'm asking because I'm confused because we're at the end of one year going into another.
No, I'm asking about now at this point in time, we have to make a decision.
Okay.
The money's already been spent. So we have to make a decision. Do we just continue to spend down our reserves and make that deliberate vote that we're going to go below the threshold that we set not to go below? Or let's take a look at where we could cut and pay for it. At least have the conversation, because I don't feel that we've discussed that topic in depth enough.
Understood. Thank you for clarifying. Appreciate that. I see a hand up in the back under new business, Mr. McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to point out that there's 5 of us here in the board floor. I feel that we're doing a great job socially distancing. It added no cost to the county as we're using one computer. We've got our phones up at the screen so we can see each other better, for those of you that are out there in the Zoom land. But I'd like to encourage you. I think we're doing a great job, not adding any cost to the county. Hopefully, next board meeting, we can have a few more people join us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. McDonald. And any other new business? I don't see any. So with that, I entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion by Mr. Girl. I'll take a second. So we're official. Thank you, Mr. Zintak.
I'm sorry, who made the second, Mr. Chairman?
Second by Mr. Zintak.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you. Any opposed? We have adjourned. Thank you very much.